Oh, a finish from Leacher here to the box. Hotter, will he go for goal? Goes for goal. Here it is!
Might drop here, Ziggins! Off the line by Ring! And in!
Welcome to the Bees Analytica Podcast. Hello and welcome to the 14th episode of the Bees Analytica Podcast. On this week's episode, we'll be discussing the academy system here in England, its flaws, its merits, and continuing the conversation from where we were last week. On this week's episode, I'm joined by my usual host, James, but also joined by special guest Matthew, who currently worked in academy football as a coach across various different categories, and is also currently now coaching in women's football. I'll let Matthew introduce himself quickly to you, and we'll get on with the debate. Welcome, guys. Hope you're doing all right.
Thank you. My name's Matthew. I've currently just finished a master's in performance football coaching, and alongside that, I've been working in academy football. Most recently at Category 3 Academy as a foundation phase coach. And during my studies, I also managed to go into different environments and observe and analyze different approaches within different academies across the category phases. So that's kind of my experience in academy football.
Brilliant. So I'm going to open the floor then and start off with this question. What is the purpose of the Clubs Academy then? What's our thoughts and feelings on this to get the ball rolling?
I think for me, the most important thing that I would always say is that academies are essentially a player development program. So a bit like the B team model, that's another player development program. The main aim for it and the initial EPPP system was to try and improve the quality of players brought through for the England team, for the national team. So that was kind of the aim for it, and in a way to ensure that clubs are operating at a certain level, and to ensure that the best players sort of drift up into working in the best environments. So that was kind of my understanding about what these academies essentially do.
Do you think it reaches that objective though? Will James come to you on this? Do you think that it's actually providing a pathway through for England's best talent?
Well, yeah, if it's done kind of correctly, if there's a good relationship between the academy and the first, I think that's the important thing, is having that relationship, and the pathway is the whole point of the academy. Is, it's there to get players through into the first team. So if it's done successfully, which it is at a few clubs, then yeah, it can be a brilliant source.
I think as a whole though, do we think that we've seen players come from lower league academies and rise up and then come into the England system through that route, or are most of them there by the point they break through potentially? So you look at someone like Foden, he's not played through the lower leagues, he's gone through City's system and then popped up. Are we seeing kind of that whole, it's there just to protect the big boys, like especially the Category 1 academies that have free picking essentially of those at the bottom? Because I can't think of many examples off the top of my head, and gents, please jump in if you do, that players that have gone from either a Cat 4, Cat 3, and then jumped through, played at Cat 1 level, and then gone into the England setup in recent memory. Because the program, this is its 8th, 9th season, the program, isn't it? The EPPP.
Mm.
So, again, I can't think of any that springs to mind currently. I believe Poveda at Leeds, who's come through, who was at Brentford. But obviously he'd been released by Barca and Chelsea by that point, before going on to City, then Leeds. But I can't think of anything off the top of my head unless anyone's got anyone that they can think of.
At Reading, there's Andy Rinomota, who came through from Portchester into Reading's academy, who's now gone on to make 100 first team appearances, but I don't know about kind of international level.
What sort of age was he when he was picked up, or like
16, 17?
Oh wow, bloody hell. Didn't realise it was that old.
He went into our he'd been playing, I think, men's football for AFC Portchester, who were up in Yorkshire. And then we signed him to put him into our academy, and he played 2 or 3, maybe 4 seasons in the academy before coming through, I think. and he's obviously been he's invaluable to this Reading side in particular, and he's one that we're gonna, well, obviously with contracts and stuff, we should make a lot more money off of.
Yeah, well, we had that whole conversation, didn't we, with Reading in the Omar Richards situation currently of...
He came in from Fulham's academy into Reading's academy when he was 16. So but that obviously Fulham are category 1 as well, but he moved across from a different academy to make his name at Reading.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I think for me, one of the players that kind of springs to mind is someone like a John Stones, who started at Barnsley, who were Cat 2, and progressed obviously through Everton, and then obviously now at Man City, and has had a sort of a resurgence as such. So that might be another example I would kind of point out too.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And was he on professional terms, though, by the point he got through at Barnsley? Because I remember him being in the first team at the time anyway, and then that would have meant they would have probably got a pretty decent fee for him in the end, and a sell-on, if they were fortunate enough. Especially when he went...
Yeah. I suppose, I mean, to be honest, I'm not sure on that one, but I suppose the point is there's many different ways in which a player could progress to that level. So it might be that a player's gone through the academy system, made the first team appearances, then has been signed on as a professional again by a Premier League club, and has subsequently moved on. So that might be one way in which to do it. It doesn't necessarily mean that a player had to have come through at Cat 1 straight away into a top first team. It might be a different way that they've come through that system. And that's the most important point. It's not a sort of a one size fits all model. There's going to be different things altogether. You've got the Phil Foden, for example, who have come through an academy straight into the first team, but you'll have some who will come through other academies, made the first team appearances, then progress. I mean, I guess the other one you'd look at is probably like a Chris Mepham in some aspects. I know it's a Welsh national team, but similar aspects where he's come through Brentford, academy, B team. Now he's was in the first team, then got a sell on to a Premier League club at the time in Bournemouth, and as well was starting to become a Welsh international. So that there are, like I said, there is many different ways in which it could transpire.
Yeah, no, that's totally why I bring up the point on what the purpose of it, because each club is very tribalistic in a sense with this country as well. But specifically, is what do we feel? Is it to benefit the club, the academy system, or is it to benefit us on the international stage? But personally, as a Brentford fan and someone that runs a big Brentford account, I think it's very much the academy is club centric. It should be to provide and sell assets for the first team. But from Matt, you're coming in from the different standpoint as a coach, as it should be a development program for the best players in our country. And do we then necessarily feel clubs shouldn't be so tribalistic in a sense of clinging on to their best talent? They should let them move through the system.
I think it works in both ways. I mean, of course, from a international point of view, you want the best players having the best opportunity to reach their potential, whether that's Premier League. Well, for most cases, they want them to reach Premier League. I suppose the way I look at it is in this country, what this EPPP was set up for was to get the best players to be at the best academies essentially, and to be able to progress. But at the same time, if it is clubs that are who are running this, then they've also got to see an element of a return. Again, football is very much a business, and clubs can't be seen to be running at massive losses if they're not getting any sort of returns on it. So that would be my sort of a counter argument. There's a bit of a for and against in that sense. As a coach, you always want the best for play, especially if you're working in a development sort of environment. You want the best players to reach their potential, or you want all players to reach their potential, shall I say? And if a move is the best thing for them, as a coach, you will welcome that, or you would support them in their decisions. So, from a coach's point of view, you always all you want is the best for those players in that system. From a club's point of view, it might be slightly different because there's an end goal for them, which is to either get players into the first team so they can either sell them on, or use them so that they can achieve their goals, essentially.
No, absolutely. I agree with that coaching point of view. So, for instance, if you were still coaching if COVID obviously wasn't around and you were still coaching in the academy system, and you had a player come to you or a club from another scouter come to you saying that there was a player that they were interested in moving up, what would be your advice as a coach, purely from that point of view? Would you tell the player jump at the opportunity? Would you tell them to stay put maybe and continue their development? What sort of pressures would you face as a coach as well? Because obviously the club, if they get a fee for them, might be vital, especially in pandemic circumstances. I'd be interested to hear your thought process, especially with your coaching hat on, of how you would deal with a player being approached by another club.
Again, it will come down to what my role is within that academy. So the last role I had in an academy, I was purely there as an age group coach. So my job was essentially to work with the players, training grounds, match days, work with them, help develop them. So essentially, in those discussions were sort of not really with myself in that sense. In terms of that, it's a club's decision. Then it goes to the academy manager, and they have to then take whatever action is necessary. So from my personal opinion, my role was simply to keep working with those players. I think for me, if players get an opportunity, I guess it depends on what is best for them. So each player is unique in what they want to is unique in so many different ways. In terms of how they play, how they develop. For some players, it might be too early to move. For some players, it might be in the optimal environment for them at the moment. For some players, they might need that move to further challenge and push them to be in an environment like that, where obviously the higher you go in the category system, that more access to different disciplines. And what I mean by that is things such as analysis, S&C, education, all those sort of things are you've got more full-time staff and more facilities to do that. So some players might need that at that time. Some players might actually feel that this is the right environment for them to keep developing, and as a result, they keep developing well, and then they move on at a later stage, or they go into the first team, and get their move even later on after that. So it very much depends on the type of player that you're looking at in these situations. It very much depends on that.
100%. So what sort of things do you think, and James will bring you into this one, what sort of stuff does an academy actually provide in terms compared to grassroots? Because this is my big bugbear, and I will mention it with the academy system, is a kid at under 9s level is going to be a totally different kid to under 16s to under 18s at that point. What is the purpose of putting them into a system where I don't see what much difference between that and specifically grassroots? So the question I'm kind of asking here is that, what does academy systems provide that at under 9s level as well, especially to what they can get elsewhere? So this is an open floor. Leave it to either of you two to come back at me at this point, because I know it's a slightly narrow view on it, but I'm interested to hear what you guys have got to say.
I'll go first. So I think the first thing is contact time. So at an academy, you're normally training 3 times a week, plus you have a game on a Sunday, or there might be a game program. So you're looking at a contact time of 4 times a week. That's a minimum in terms of the schoolboy level. When you get to when you get to the point of becoming a scholar, which is your first sort of major contract as such, then then obviously you're now essentially working as a footballer. So you're now having a schedule where you're training 3 or 4 times. You're training about 4 times during the week. Have a game on a Saturday, and then the cycle repeats. So when you're a scholar, you're essentially a full-time footballer. That's your job. When you're under 9 to under 16, again the contact time is 3 times a week. At Cat 1 level, that might increase because then you have, like you said, you have different disciplinary interventions such as S&C analysis, education, especially if you're on a full-time program. Because I know some players in the 9 to 16, especially at Cat 1, they're on a full-time program which they go to a school which is run by the club, or not run by the club, but they have an association with the club, so they'll go to that school, and then sometimes they'll have day release where they'll come out of school and do a session, do extra work in the club. So I suppose my first thing, compare that to a grassroots level. Grassroots, normally you're looking at once, twice a week training and a game on a week. So automatically you're cutting your contact time straight away. So that's probably the first thing you're looking at. Second thing is access to coaches. Now, I'm not saying that coaching badges equals the ability level of the coach, but you have to have certain prerequisite qualifications to work in an academy. So you have to. So the coaches should be of a standard, or should be of a specific standard that means that they have certain expertise and knowledge of how to develop players, and that includes the youth awards. So you have to have that, and the other thing is, especially in higher higher categories and Cat 1s, then you've got more full-time staff. So you've got coaches that might work with a certain age group being are actually full-time. So again, if that's their full-time job, then they can devote more time to it. Whereas at grassroots level, you might have coaches who are already coming from, who already got day jobs and they have to go from that to coaching in the evening. So again, the amount of time that people can devote to it is a massive thing. So that would be kind of the major thing.
I was going to say on that point then, I just don't see the appeal in it, truthfully, of like, how can a coach, especially a player at the age of 9 that hasn't gone through puberty yet, hasn't really developed full motor skills as of yet with their ABCs, how are you able to tell a player is going to be quality from the age of 9 to the age of 18 or 16, 17, where they're potentially going up to scholar terms? Like, that's my biggest point. I see it as the systems, the way it's set up currently, is very much of just fear of missing out. You hoover up all of these kids and you're going to feed them the dream of they're all going to play professional football, they're going to get there, build them up all the way through at the age of 9 when they can sign on academy terms. That's not even mentioning the pre-academies where there is no limit currently, so you could have kids as young as 3 in a pre-academy system. Like, I just don't get why clubs need to have all these young players with the stats back it up that about 1 or 2, if that per age group, might get a professional contract.
Well, that's why they're doing it, I guess, is to get those 1 or 2. They're looking for that. I guess the thing is, the younger they are, the more easily moldable they are, and you can hope that if you can see they've got something about them that young, that you can kind of polish that so that as they go up through the age groups, you're getting them better and better and better. And then by the time they do reach 18, that they do, are able to make the grade. But no, I definitely do think that sometimes it does get a bit silly with just how young some of them are.
Yeah, some of you might have seen that City image from a few months ago where they had an under-5 pre-academy team and they all had their City kits on and it was called the pre-academy, but City had to come out and defend themselves for not running an academy set up for 5-year-olds. I think it was like you were offered the chance to have one-on-one coaching sessions. You were in 3 times a week. I think Training Ground Guru did a brilliant article on it covering it, and it was like, really? We starting to go this level because a 5-year-old might be good before they can even go to school.
Yeah, at that age, it should just be about enjoying it, shouldn't it? Really, you shouldn't even be putting the fact that it could be a career into the minds of those, kids at that age. A lot of it, though, is the parents. It's exactly what you said earlier. You're selling them the dream that you're taking the whole family and the kid along with you, with the hope that 1 or 2 might just be enough to make some money off of.
Oh, go on, Matt. Sorry.
I was going to say, I think for me, a lot of these things kind of get blown out of proportion in certain aspects. So I know there's always this talk about premature professionalism in the sense that you're almost getting kids to be professional. In terms of the work and what I've seen, and again, I can only go on what I've seen and a lot of the work that clubs do at those younger ages is much more than just beyond, well, it's going to be this serious and this, it's a lot more beyond that. So there is a bigger picture. And like you said, there is an element of introducing players that they'll do different activities. They'll do different things to improve, like, for example, the ABCs. The way you have to look at it is, it's a bit like I don't know, in school, the gifted and talented sort of sector, where they try and give extras to help yield that talent essentially, and it's sort of, and that's the way you got to look at it. It's not a case of just signing players just so we're gonna get all these players through there. The whole point of it is we see players that are doing well and are probably exceeding where they're playing at the moment, in the sense that you can tell when you watch them play that they stand out, and it's almost like giving them another environment where there's going to be more players of a similar skill level to maybe and the opportunity of extra coaching as an opportunity to kind of develop, to see if that will help them develop. And it's about just giving them those it's more about providing those opportunities rather than just hoovering up whatever talent we can. Now that's as a coach speaking from the top level in the hierarchy, as in the academy director, the owners, and going forward, that view might change. But from a coach's point of view, and some of the work that I've done and I've seen, it's far from beyond just we're gonna try and nick as many of these players as we can and make sure we get them before this club gets them. From my point of view, in that sense.
Yeah, no, totally. Where do you draw the line though of that? Of it's all about elitism and you separate the bad from the good. At what point where do we think enough is enough, especially young kids, where football is a social thing for a lot of players and is one of the biggest sports in the country? At what point do you turn around and stop categorising by, or do you start categorising by elite? Because you mentioned even as young as 5, you think. And please tell me if I'm misconstruing your point that is fair enough to have, you put the best with the best and then the worst with the worst. Please tell me if I'm wrong, is that you believe at 5 that's a fair age to be splitting them up in the way City did, or in that sense?
Again, the City thing, that was the only one that I was aware of that I've done it that young. Now, I mean, the way it's been portrayed, again, it's very difficult without knowing the full facts about what they exactly do. I mean, there's loads of different things out there where kids as young as 2, 3, and all, like all these different private companies are encouraging, like are doing like sessions with them with young players for them to enjoy. It might just be an extension of that, but they've but for some reason they were given kit or something. It might just be that I don't actually know exactly what that exactly that. I don't think there was any games programs or anything like that they were involved in. I don't know if they were there 3 or 4 times a week. They might just be there, and it might just be an extra session which players have gone to. Sorry, you were saying?
Yeah, no worry. I can read you the article with what the club stated was going on.
Yeah, please.
The reality of it at the time was they split the under fives into 3 age groups, and they had it as a development group who trained once a week at the city development centre, the academy level, and then the elite level who were training 3 times a week and would receive official kit. And that's what that photo that then came around was, the under 5 junior academy elite. That's madness in my mind. At age 5, they're training 3 times a week, 4 in this instance, pretty much. We're training 3 times a week already. Like, that's where I bring that point up, was where does the line be drawn? In my personal opinion, I think under 9s are way too young. I'm talking not until 13, 14, until puberty at least, because I just believe that development in a player is so different. A player might not have a growth spurt until they turn 14, 15. By that point, they've been chewed up, spat out by the academy system because they're too short. You know, how can you tell a player from where they are at 5 to 15, 16 when they go on to scholar terms? And that's that big point I'm making. A line has to be drawn somewhere with these players. I don't think any 4-year-old should be training 3 times a week. I don't believe a 9-year-old should be put into a professional environment. And James covered this point brilliantly. I think it sells them a dream of, you're going to be a professional player, you'll be a professional player, but the statistics back it up that one of them, maybe 2 of them at best, may get a professional contract at some point. And that's where I think the academy system is grossly flawed, is that there are hundreds, thousands of players that come through a system that at one point then will just get dumped out. And that's where I have the issue working with the academy side. Again, you've had these experiences and you've worked in the industry. You've seen it a lot differently to someone like me and James have, who aren't in the industry itself. But yeah, it's that blurred lines of, why does a 4-year-old need to be training 3 times a week? Why shouldn't that 4-year-old be learning its motor skills by playing multi-sports or multiple sports, trying to rugby, playing a bit of football, trying hockey, basketball, cricket? Surely that's more beneficial for a player's long-term development, especially in a sporting sense, than just football. You're going to be a professional player. You've got a kit. And I know I'm just dragging on to the City point, but this is for all academies that have a pre-academy system that sign kids up to pro forms at the age of 10, 11, 12, or academy forms at 10, 11, 12. Surely that kid should be learning how to control their body through motor skills, but he should be playing different sports for the social aspect, the psychological element, where they can learn. They can take a lot from netball, basketball, how to move, passing and moving, with not being able to only move when you've got the ball, that type of stuff. I think, James, I'm going to let you come in and open this bit up about multi-sports, because that was my next point. Do we think kids in an academy system, all the way through from 9s where they can sign their first official forms, up until the age of 16, 17, should they be allowed to play different sports?
Yeah, I think so. There's no harm in playing multiple different sports, and all different sports bring their own skills. I mean, I think that, for example, a goalkeeper, I think playing cricket could be a great help for thingies. But there's nothing against playing other sports. I don't agree with because when you're in an academy, you can't play for another Saturday or Sunday league team. I never got that. Surely you want them to play as much football as possible. But then again, that comes with covering your own back and hoping they don't get injured and whatever else, which also makes sense. But no, I think the more sports, the more they're out being active, the better. It can't harm, surely. The only thing is injuries, but that comes with the territory.
Obviously, that's why I was going to bring Matthew in for
Yeah.
his view on it. Did you ever, in your experiences, limit the other sports kids could play? Because James has touched on it there, that if a kid is signed onto an academy form, they can't then play football for a grassroots club. But what's then the multi-sport aspect like, especially in the academy systems you've been in?
So one of the things that we've done, and one of the things that when I was working, the league coaches I worked under did, was bring in a lot of different multi-sports games that they did in part of their training program. So during their 3 sessions a week, one of the sessions they would have done different activities. So
You got any examples you would be willing to share with us, like to what sort of stuff you'd get up to?
So for example, there'd be different things such as movements. You might have like movement games, tag games, different games such as like I said, you've got like a netball style game, a handball style game, different things in terms of players being able to have to engage in different decision making factors. That would be included in that. Different things. There might be different, like you might do different like races, fun races, to sort of like competition where they would have to do different. So not just running, but it might be hopping, skipping, different things like that. Strength, like I said, different things where they might have to jump over different obstacles. Is certain things. So again, that's where we talk about where they're engaging in a variety of different movement, what we call movement games, where they're having to do different movements, engage in different movements. It might be they have to do some throwing and catching games where they might have to. It might be a team game, a bit like similar to netball, where they might have to try and get the ball instead of throwing it into a hoop. They might have to get into a certain zone where players have to run and make movements to try and get the ball. They might have to protect the ball. So again, they're developing different motor skills, different decision making skills, team social skills in terms of interactions with different players. Again, cross age groups as well. So it might be that you might get the under 9s and under 10s, they work together. So there might be different things where they can do with that. It might be that you might have an under 9 and under 11 where they're working together and developing skills. It might be that they're not opposed with each other, but they might having to learn different interactions. So there's so many different things that might be incorporated with that. In category 1, there's obviously more multidisciplinary stuff. So it might be that they got movement coaches at those levels that are specifically designed those games. When you go lower down, the coach like yourself has to kind of do a bit of both. So you incorporate that into your program where you incorporate different movements within those programs, and you try and do it in a way which is simple but fun games which players can feel enjoyment of doing. Mm-hmm. So that would be my first thought. I suppose my next thing to do, because we talk about this idea of multisports, and I agree, a lot of players need to experience so many different types of sports. They still got access to their usual PE that they'll do at school, so that's one of the sources of experience in that.
So you argue that a grassroots coaching isn't elite, like specialised enough, and we've had that conversation where academies provide ample benefit. How then's a PE teacher providing better quality multi-sport experience to a younger player? Like, that's where I struggle to. That obviously, we've said the academy system's there to be specialised, better coaching, better contact time, better resources. Yep. You then say that they go into multiple sports via PE at school.
Yep.
That's not particularly elite or specialised, is it, as such? So are they actually getting much benefit from that in your eyes, from where your position is on academy to grassroots?
Well, I suppose my point is within that the argument is if they're going to do elite rugby, elite football, elite hockey, there's not enough hours in a day for that, and all of a sudden that is we are literally talking about it being too much. Again, we've got to talk about it in the terms of sampling phase, which is basically a young person is sampling all these different types of sports, skills, whatever, within the PE element. But it might be that that football is more of something that they enjoy more doing, that they enjoy doing it more. So, and again, that might be that a route that they feel they got a talent in, shall we say? So, I think for in that sense, there is this element of yes, you might try and specialize in one sport, but it doesn't mean you can't sample all the others. And it happens in not just football, but in all different types of sports. If you look at, for example, gymnastics, that is very much an early specialized sport, which they train from a very, very young age. I'm pretty sure other sports, other physical activities such as ballet and different types of that, they do that from a very young age as well. So it is. So there are other examples of where lots of sports do have opportunities for what I call early specialization, but it doesn't mean that that's going to be the route for everyone. So so the way I look at it again is you've got a younger age group. So if there's players that fall into that category where that's the sport they enjoy, that's the sport that they want to pursue, and they might know it and they enjoy the fact that they can do the extra training and enjoy that then you got that route that you go through the foundation phase, youth development phase, professional, and go through that route. There's other routes where you might enter that pathway at a later stage, so you might not get picked up to the youth development phase because that's the way you've developed meant that you're more ready for it then, or that your skill set, or again you're talking about puberty as meant that you've all of a sudden now physically are better placed. That might be another avenue, and then you've got the other route, which some players might not even touch the academy system, and now they've gone through like the reserve non-league football, and all of a sudden they're in the professional element. So there is many ways in which a player can develop. So I suppose that would be my argument, is that there's other sports that do this and almost required to do it, which are not football, but they do it, and that it's still that it's just only one pathway of many pathways. So it's not saying that pathway is for everyone. It might not be for everyone. It might be for a select few. It might be, so it's just one form of the pathway.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going to put you on the spot then a bit. You've got a player that's come to you. What sort of age group were you coaching, roughly?
Foundation phase, so 9s to 12s.
Yeah, so
I worked with different age with different players across that age range.
Yeah, just for this example, then you've got an 11-year-old to come to you. Their parents are chatting with you as well and said they've just started rugby. They're in your academy system. They really want to play rugby. As a coach, would you tell them to go ahead with it, or would you, at the provision of the club, tell them, look, please hold off because we don't want to injure you? Where would you draw? What sort of circumstance would you put on that, and how would you react really as an academy coach?
It depends on what we're talking about in terms of rugby. There's different forms of. Are we talking about
full-blown rugby union at that age? Because I believe it goes to contact about 12, so they're a year away from contact rugby.
Yeah, but they might be playing rugby at their school. They might be playing rugby as part of like the district level rugby.
I'd just be general grassroots, to be honest. Like just general, they just want to play another sport on the side because they've got nothing to do on the Saturdays. It's because they've got games on Sundays and they want to do something on the Saturday.
Again, my advice or my viewpoint on that is I want to encourage. I would encourage them that they can pursue that area. I suppose my view of it is that, do they want to pursue? Are they keeping it open? Are they looking to play? Are they looking to continue in the academies in the football setup? I suppose my next question, because again, whenever you embark on any form of sports, it's always a level of commitment. There always is a level of commitment. So even if you are playing rugby at grassroots level, there's still going to be training days. Again, it depends on what the club setup is.
Yeah.
So it is very much that's where all of a sudden you got all these contexts added into it. Plus, again, although I'm a coach, then there's certain protocols that the club might have in place to do with that I'd have to abide by, which means that it's not just what my views are on it. It's a case of, well, what is the club's view on it? Again, we have to put the child first as well, which is the most important thing in terms of, well, what do they actually want to do? If they want to open that up, is the academy system for them? It might not be for them. They might want to pursue different things in that, and that is also fair enough for that child, because again, if they want to explore different sports, they're more than welcome to. So it's very difficult to give a hypothetical answer, because there's so many different variables you're looking at before that. I know when I was working with players, I know some players did other sports. Some of them played rugby for the school, did stuff for the school. They ran. Some of them did like the cross country running as they got older, and they did different runnings, and they wanted to do like I think they used to call it like like the mini Olympics thing. They used to call it, where they used to do things for the school, and used to be that. So those sort of things. So there's so many different avenues, I would say.
No, totally. Yeah, it's a complex issue, and it's not always so black and white of what works. I know I've done a lot of bashing of the academy system in this so far, but I do want to mention the futsal programs. I think they are brilliant as a way. I think futsal, I know the FA recently cut the budgets for it, which was a bit stupid considering they encouraged the academies with futsal tournaments. But I do think that's a really big key element of the games program that a lot of academy systems have to improve ball control and stuff. And we've seen it with someone like Max Kilman at Wolves currently, who played futsal for a lot of his quote-unquote professional career before moving into football or full-time. I think that's a big key part, and I think, yeah, James, we'll bring you into this then. Like, I know neither of us has coached at a level, but there is some good merits to the futsal. And what do we see with, like, especially the technique side and the technical element of football?
So I think futsal's brilliant for the close control and the more football you play, the better in any style, and the close control you get with the futsal. Because there's isn't it Max Kilman?
Max Kilman, yeah, I just mentioned him.
He was the futsal player, and it's certainly not harmed him at all. So no, I love playing futsal, and I know that footballers ultimately want to play football, and in any style, it's the same sport, just in a different situation. And I think it's definitely going to improve certain players. They do it, foreign teams. Spanish always play futsal, and that certainly doesn't harm them. So
yeah, no, this is where I was going to tie it into the FA, because they've kind of shot themselves in the foot. I don't know if this directive has come from the FA or it's a Premier League thing that ties in with the Elite Player Performance Programme. But why they cut the budgets for it? That was only recent that they stated COVID as their main reason. But then if you're encouraging to improve the technical aspects of English and British players coming through the system, why cut it? Like, it just seems daft. You've spent all this time encouraging players to do it, and you've got these specific programs in place. Then why is it now? Yeah, it's just one of them weird things that they seem to have copied from another country. I know they had the English DNA when I was doing my badges. Of this is how we play. This is the textbook. You follow that. Because the Spanish, the Germans, FAs all had them as well. Like, Matt, you might have some experience with the English DNA. and game models. Is it something that you use as a framework, or is it more discretion again of the club that you've been with?
I think you've got yourself and your own personal beliefs on player development and player. I don't want to use the word playing philosophy, but in terms of a game plan and a game model, and also then on the side of that, you got your coaching, pedagogical beliefs and preferences, and especially for my background from education, from academic route in terms of doing the masters, I try and keep what I do as much as I can evidence based, based on what the science almost says in terms of the benefits, and most of the things it's almost a trade-off in terms of what approach you take. There's merits to it, but there's also things that it limits. But but as a coach, you kind of make those decisions.
Is that academic based, or is it more practical? Is what you base your game model
on? Game model depends on I think more so what you believe in, because that's more about how your team performs. For me, I think from a coaching point of view, I kind of base it on the academic side as part one of the thing, but also the practical side of it, because what works in one context doesn't necessarily work in another context, and it might have to be framed in a completely different way. So there's so many. So what works at under 9 level at a Category 3 academy might not work at a grassroots club in the under 16 academy, at a under 16 level, because there's so many different contextual factors which will influence what you're going to do and why. From my perspective, so many different things. So, for example, the context of the club is massive. So, yes, you've got the England DNA, and largely it's largely beneficial, and there's largely some really good points in that. But most of the things each club have as part of your EPPP application, you have to have a document which states what your playing philosophy, we'll call it, your coaching philosophy, your pathways, what your weeks looks like, how you plan a year, all that within it. So as a club, as a result, as a coach going into that environment, you're straight away constrained by how that club operates, essentially, because you can't just go in and go, well, I'm going to coach it the way I want to coach it. You have to look at what the club are looking to do, because essentially you're only working with a group of players for a year. Then they're going to go off to the next age group, and you might not be their coach next year, but the club want to have something in place which means that everything is unified, so that there's a sort of a cohesive approach, although varied based on the age that you're working at, in terms of the level of details you're going to go into. So, in my experience, I kind of like to. Like I said, I like to take into account what the club is doing first, primarily, because that's essentially what how they want the players to develop.
Mm-hmm. No, totally. I think that's the interesting thing. You mentioned the use of theory to dictate, and obviously there's a lot more factors to than just a basic idea of just going off the theory. A lot of academia that I've read, especially through my degree currently, it's based on a lot of possession-heavy games. But then would you say someone like Leicester completely bucks that trend? But academic literature hasn't caught up really as of yet. It's still a couple of years more before we get the effect of possession on a game, like a detailed study, because Leicester completely bucked all current literature suggesting that having more passes, having more possession, led to a more successful performance. Do you think that then will swing it again, and that's where that variance will come when you go to look at coaching again?
It depends on your outlook on the game, I guess. I mean, the way I view it is that football is an invasion game, and that's what we got to remember. So football, like futsal, like handball, like hockey, rugby, they're all invasion games, and the aim of any game is to outscore your opponent. So, and there's different ways you can do that. There's different models. You can look to play route one and try and hit the forwards early and try and gain territory in the opposition half as much as you can do. There's certain models in which you look to build a possession base where you try and build it through the thirds and to get to the final third. There's some models in which you try and look to your primary method is to defend deep, hit teams on the counter attack. Largely, all that depends on the type of players you have. So there's two ways you can look at it. You can either, and that depends on the resources you've got. You can either look at a team that has got certain players that you can't, that you've not got much room to change, and in which case you have to then devise a system based on those players you've got and to bring out the best in them. The alternative method is if you look at, again, we'll use Man City for example. They brought in Pep Guardiola to bring in how he wants to play the game, and as a result, there's almost a blank checkbook to go, right, well, I need specific players that are going to make this work, and then they go out and buy them. So there's so many different ways in which football can be played. Possession, the theory of possession, especially, you've got more possession, you've got more chance of winning the game. But there's also alternative methods which you say, well, if I'm a coach that's team plays out of possession, I might still control the game by making sure you have the ball in certain areas of the pitch, and then I look to win it in certain areas and counter with it. So there's so many different aspects, the ways you look at it. You've got to remember that academia is not it's not the be all and end all as well. So we use that, but we can use that, and it's a form of evidence-based methodologies and approaches. But at the same time, you got to then, as a coach or as whoever is reading it, has got to then look at that and say, is that important? Does that impact me? Is there flaws to this? And that's more, I'm sure, as you know, when you're at university, the more you do it, the more you're looking at critically appraising what you're doing. So it's not a case of just saying, well, this is the research and that's it. You look at it and go, well, this doesn't really tell me anything, or there's actually some flaws into the way you've done it. So there's so many different. Again, it's not just saying that I try and use evidence based, but sometimes there might be some bits of evidence that I've looked at and I've gone, well, actually, there's actually some flaws with this, and it's actually been shown in another paper. So there's so many different ways in which again, you can look at it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think as we approach onto the hour mark, we're going to go into the last little topic that is also probably one of my bigger criticisms, especially coming as a Brentford fan. And that is, as we've mentioned throughout the podcast, the Elite Player Performance Programme. Just in the list in front of me, I've got at least 6 or 7 clubs that are in the Football League or were in the Football League at its conception that have either shut or closed their academy down. Hereford, obviously, who went into administration and then have come up as a Phoenix team. Wickham, currently a Championship side who don't have an academy system. Yeovil, who were a former Championship team, who have now shut their academy down because of the Elite Player Performance Programme. Brentford listed it as one of many reasons why they shut down their academy. Huddersfield have remodelled their academy as long as Birmingham into a B and C team system. Salford shut theirs down as recently as this season, where they said it was no longer viable to run an academy, and Bolton, although not shutting it down, have downgraded it considerably due to the conditions of the Elite Player Performance Programme and the financial burden it would place upon the clubs to keep it running. Just looking at my current figures that I have in front of me, to run a Category 1 academy, you need at least a minimum of 18 full members of staff on contracts. You need to have operating budget of at least $2.5 million a season in order to gain Category 1 status. Obviously, 2 and 3 then knock it down a step. I just look at this and think there are clubs here, especially your Brentford, who are in West London, which is densely populated with your Chelseas, your Fulhams, your QPRs, your Birmingham, who are surrounded by Wolverhampton Wanderers, West Brom, Aston Villa, are three really big teams, and probably leaves Birmingham as probably the smaller of the three, or smaller of the four, sorry. Huddersfield up in Yorkshire, you got Leeds surrounding them, and that. So again, one of them that get limited. Salford, who have Manchester clubs on their doorstep, and then even Oldham, who are slightly further down the road to them. Do we just feel that the elite player performance program is stifling these clubs in order to have an academy system? Especially these smaller. These are championship clubs. Some of these as well. Your Brentford, Huddersfield, Birmingham, and then Yeovil, Wickham, who are championship or former championship teams. So it just seems ridiculous that you pay into this program that your players can be watched without permission they have to get permission 24 hours or 48 hours before a game. They can get a limited fee for them if they're not in the top band. I think the maximum you can get for an under 16 player with 0 EFL appearances as a category 3 or 4 academy, which most championship clubs would be or fall into that bracket, is 71 grand. Like, what's the point? You'll make more money buying a younger player from a foreign league and then selling them for more because they're on professional terms.
It's a lot of it is not only the club selling the dream, but the club believing in the dream, and that all the club needs is one player to be sold for a decent amount of money, and that for that 1 year or maybe 2 years or 3 years, and that academy is paid for.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, with Birmingham, for example, them selling Bellingham, that more or less runs the academy itself for 10, 15 years if they decide to, if that's how they choose to reinvest some of the money. I mean, Reading personally have been very successful at bringing through academy players and selling them on, and it does become viable if you do it well enough and that you can make enough money out of it. But yeah, it is frustrating when you can, you spend all that money and you can't just lose players for nothing. That's I don't get.
In context, obviously it's not nothing. 71 grand's probably quite a nice chunk of change for a few of the lower league teams.
Yeah, but it's limiting how much you could earn, because you could earn a hell of a lot more.
So it ties into my Omar Richards argument. And again, by going back to development programs are different, or development pathways are different. Omar Richards was on the cusp of the first team last year. The year before that, he was nowhere near the first team. He's now suddenly grown, he's 22, 6 months left on his contract, and Reading can't get a penny for him, despite being a Category 1 academy. It's that risk and reward, because 2 years ago, he wasn't deemed a top prospect. He wasn't deemed ready for the first team at the age of 20. He was playing in Premier League 2 in one of the 2 divisions. So Reading are in the top one, aren't they, of that? He's now 6 months away from being able to go join Bayern Munich for nothing. He might go to a tribunal if he now goes to an English club. But it's just pennies. Danny Loader did the same at Reading. He was thought as one of the top prospects for a long, long time. Never got a contract, or never got an extension on his contract that meant Reading could then receive a fee for him, because he left to go on to put Porto, because it was deemed a better system for him at the age of 19, 20, and Reading get nothing.
Yeah, he turned down the contract, to be fair. There was one on the table, and he decided to walk away for nothing.
That's where the elite player performance program has its difficulties, because you try and get these players onto contracts, youth terms. Elise's on one currently, Richards is currently on one, but they get to a point where they just run out because you don't know how a player develops. Even at 20 to 22, which Richards falls into for the last 2-3 years. Reading didn't know enough to offer him a longer term deal. So they're now standing to lose him for nothing. If the Bayern rumours are to be true and it goes through. He might not, and he might run his contract down and go elsewhere in the summer. We don't know. But I was going to bring you into this point, and we'll talk about it a bit as a Brentford. That's why, and they've mentioned in their statement, it was about 4 or 5 years ago, maybe longer than that, where they discussed it. And just the catchment of it all. It's difficult to run a system. Brentford were, if they're running it, was $2.5 million a year they'd lose running that academy. For what? For a player that might then be sold for 71 grand at max if they haven't made it to the EFL by that point. And if they'd made it onto Brentford's bench by that point, I believe it was only an extra 50 to £100,000. If they'd played 10 appearances, they'd get an extra 25 grand. If they played 20, they'd get 50, 30, 75, 40, 100. Which is pennies for a £2.5 million investment. Not to even mention that the clubs could have then just come up and picked them off by the time they're 15, 16 in the event they might become good. Especially Chelsea. Chelsea are one of the most efficient systems at it. Obviously, there's been limits with loans now and how much you can get people out. But Chelsea literally could just pick up Brentford's best players on fairly minimal contracts for what it is. Like 71 grand and a lot to someone like Chelsea. Loan him out and probably recoup most of that fee within the 5 or 6 years of just loan after loan after loan. So it's that difficult one, and I think we've covered it a lot on this pod and this episode. And Matt, your insight's been brilliant. It's been great to chat. And
Can
James,
I was just going to add one thing on
yeah,
talking
go
about
ahead, Joe.
I think the thing that we've got to remember is that we come back to it is a player development program. So, firstly, it isn't without its faults. I think that, and no player development program is. I mean, like for example, I know with going down the B team and C team model, the exact same problem could still exist in the sense that you could sign a player on a contract, they can run their contract down, and if anything, you want to get nothing for him at the end. So that is potentially so that there is what I'm trying to say is there's still flaws in that sense. I think for me, the only thing that again the EPP what it has done, it's almost added a sort of protection. Is what I'll call it. So in the old days, it used to be very messy with the tribunals, like we're talking about. This way, it was meant to allow there to be some form of clarity in terms of what outlay you can expect to get. And again, these are like the minimal terms. So, for example, it's not to say that clubs can't. For example, if you've got a player and you've got 3 or 4 different clubs, well, there's going to almost be a bidding war, essentially. There always probably will be. So as a result, there are going to be different thing to it. That tribunal thing is that thing where it talks about the compensation is more to do if it gets to the point where there's almost that standoff point where the player's not signing, and then you've got they obviously they want to join a club, and the club are kind of digging their heels in a bit. There is that element of a clarity about knowing what you're gonna get.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be me. What I would say in that, and again, it's also meant that there's an element of professionalism in it, in the sense that there is an element of the academy there has to be certain procedures and standards. So again, it's a kind of what I call it's almost like the Ofsted of what a school would be. Ofsted is to a school in terms of that it's almost like a quality assurance sort of aspect to it as well. Again, and also we've got to remember is that if we look at it, if we get away, not look at it as an EPP, but just look at it as a player development system, well, different clubs have different models, and different clubs, different models will work for it. So for me, that is going to be, that's something that I think we've got to remember, that it is just a model, and that for some clubs that just doesn't work for them, because it doesn't, because they want to develop something completely different, or they want to go down a different route.
Absolutely. I think you've done brilliantly to like kind of sum up the closing thoughts of what is the actual purpose of an academy. And I think that ties it in brilliantly with what you mentioned in the safety net. And I think ties it in with it's just unique from club to club. At Brentford may look at it as a direct way to get players into the first tier. At Birmingham City may look at it as a path to develop and finance their first tier. Reading may look at it as a way of creating players that go on and play in football somewhere or other. I think that's brilliant point towards the end that covers it all. And I think as we tip over just to the hour mark, I think we will close it up there because I think it's such a complex issue, the academy system. And I think we could go round and round in circles, but
yeah, definitely.
I think we'll leave it with that for now and before we go on any more. But thank you once again for your input. It's been brilliant. And thanks for coming on. It's been really good.
No problem.
Thank you everyone for listening as usual. If you can like, share, follow and subscribe to all of our social media accounts, that'd be absolutely brilliantly. And we're on to the next one. Thank you and goodbye.